All right. Welcome. My name is Heather Vanden Langenberg. I'm the Parenting Program Coordinator for Oneida Nation Family Services. Today, I'm hoping to share a little bit of information with you on the importance of keeping our kids feeling safe and connecting with them. We're going to talk about why safety and connection comes before anything else. And, really when it comes to our parenting and our child's brain development. So we all really want strong relationships with our children. Connecting is a huge piece of that and of strengthening families. And I'm just hoping to share a little bit of why that is with you today. All right. So don't stress about the picture of the brain. This is a basic image that we're just going to discuss these three different parts that you see here, really because it's a basis for understanding why these needs are so important for our children. So, in order for children to learn, grow, and develop, they have major needs that have to be met. So, physically, for their brain to develop, they have to meet these needs. So I'm going to break down the needs of our children into three big areas that correlate with this picture you're seeing now. So they're the need for safety, the need for connection, and the need for problem solving or learning. Each one of these areas of the brain allows us to access specific skills and only access specific skills. So for the brainstem, which is that red area you see, we must meet the need of safety. Then we can move up to the limbic system, which is that blue area where we need connection. So if we have both safety and connection met, then and only then we will have access to our prefrontal lobes, or that green area you see there where all of our skills are held. So sometimes as parents or caregivers, we expect these skills to be displayed from our children when all of these needs aren't met. So the same concept applies to us as adults too. So we have needs as well. We need to be physically safe. We need to be psychologically safe. And all of this needs to come before we can use all of our skills as parents. So we also have to be connected with, just like children do. And we need those things. We as parents need safety and connection so that we can parent in the way we hope to and access all of our awesome skills that we have. So this red part of the brain, this illustration shows us the brain stem. It says the brain functions optimally when it feels safe. So our first and our most primitive need is the need for safety. The brainstem needs this. It needs safety. We have to provide physical safety for our children before anything else. Without safety, literally nothing else matters because they cannot access any other area in their brain. So we think about, what does safety look like for infants, for toddlers, older kids? What does basic physical environmental safety look like as far as baby proofing and safety in the home, stranger safety, right? Relationship safety, medication safety, who we allow in our home, what we allow in our home, all of that. Not using drugs and alcohol when caring for our children and driving them in that state. All those kinds of things to keep our children physically safe. But humans also have a need to feel safe. So this is called psychological safety. And all of these other things for physical safety that I mentioned, amongst many other things, might be in place, but children also have to feel safe. So, and this is the biggest way to help our children stay safe, and that is composure. So us as adults remaining a composed adult. So using our tools that we have to keep composure when we're emotionally triggered or upset. So Dr. Becky Bailey, who's the creator of Conscious Discipline, says the biggest threat to a child's sense of safety is an out of control adult. So many times we fall into threatening and the use of different fear-based discipline systems, which can cause our children to feel unsafe. So especially for children who've experienced trauma, we tend to parent as we were parented, which we'll talk more about in a few moments. So often if we are not composed, out of our mouth comes the things we wish we'd never said, or the things we said we would never say or do, that have been ingrained in us from our own childhoods. And again, we'll jump a little bit more into that later. So now, If our children are physically and psychologically safe, the next biggest need is connection. So, this blue area that you see here, this is our limbic system or our emotional state. And if a child is operating out of the limbic system, then the need here is connection. So, the brain literally develops by forming connections. Connections on the outside with other people, with caring adults, make connections on the inside of a child's brain. So even though a baby's born with like 100 billion brain cells, these connections between the cells form over time. So they're called neural pathways. That's not what's important, but they're like the wiring of a house or highways that connect one part of the brain to another. Without connections on the outside, children cannot access those higher centers of the brain that allow for the learning and the impulse control and concentration and planning and rational and logical thinking, all these things that we expect children to have or to begin to show. So we might see certain behaviors when a child's operating out of the limbic system, and that would include things like name calling, whining, excluding others, being needy or clingy. So also we can see these same behaviors in adults who have the same needs as well. So these skills that I mentioned, like name calling, whining, complaining, our emotional memory, uh, these are literally only skills we can access when we are operating out of this limbic system. So conscious discipline is this curriculum I keep mentioning and what we use in our parenting program. This teaches us to use the skills of choices and empathy and encouragement to help meet that need of connection for our children. So they give us the conscious discipline gives us the tools to be able to help meet those needs for our children. So the brain develops by forming connections. So these interactions that we're talking about with caregivers are critical to this brain development. Interactions with parents and caregivers determine the growth and pattern of brain development, including connections that form the basis for our thoughts, our feelings, and our behaviors. So it's really through these relationships with caring adults that children develop the brain connections that make it possible for them to trust people, for them to regulate their own emotions, to love other people. So another fact here of brain development is that the more an experience is repeated, the stronger the resulting brain connections become. So as an example, when you repeat words or phrases to a baby, you're strengthening their language connections, right? So in the brain, and you're enabling them to begin to understand speech. So repeated traumatic events, on the other hand, can have a more negative effect. So we want to keep that in mind as well. So I like to think of it like a bike path down a dirt road. So if you ride your bike over and over again down the same path, you're likely to begin to see kind of like a divot in the road where that tire has passed through over and over. So it becomes easier to take that path as the tire has already made a deep groove to fall into without really thinking too much about it. So it's natural for that tire to go in that way. So this path in the dirt road was created by with consistency. It's like paths in your brain. So through experiences, you create these pathways in your brain that you naturally use because they have become so deeply ingrained. So just like in the dirt, you can make a new path. It just takes effort, it takes thought and consistency. You might fall back into the previous made little dirt path or divot because you know it and it's easier and we kind of fall right back in there. But you can always steer out of it again and create new paths in the road and in our brain. So connections are the basis for all change. We tend to walk around and just kind of go, hey, what's up? Or text, hey, what's up? Rather than really being present. So even with our kids, we sometimes tend to go through the motions of life because we often get overwhelmed and we have so much on our plates and we're stressed. So we go through these motions and not really connecting with them. So this is where I wanted to spend a little bit of time here today to talk about this importance of connection and how connection is an essential need for all humans. we need to know that we're loved. We need to know we're lovable and loving, for healthy brain development. So our brains are built to link each other by families and different societies and clans and humankind as a whole. So being excluded or unloved is a really is a universal fear and a huge emotional trigger for humans. So optimal development requires secure attachment. So these are formed through relationships with attuned caregivers, especially during those first 3 years of life. These secure connections are huge at shaping our capacity to form healthy relationships. So secure attachment for a child requires a couple different things. It requires them to be seen and soothed when necessary, and it requires them to feel safe. So just as the brain allows us to hear and see and smell and all of that, it also allows us to love or not. And bonds with caregivers really do wire the brain for building and sustaining these healthy relationships. Again, connections on the outside with others literally create connections on the inside of our brains. And then what about our own patterns around connection? So how we parent is how we were parented, if that makes sense. So how we connect is how we were connected with. So just as an example, if you were not shown love with, hugs and kisses or any other way, it may be hard for you to do that now. So it starts with really first being aware of our own patterns in our parenting so that we can make the changes that might be needed. So if I was never hugged as a child, it might be very difficult for me to hug my children now. If I was never told the words I love you, it might be very difficult for me to do that now. Um, and we're going to jump a little bit more into that in just one second. But before we move on, just remembering that connection is natural for some people and it's not for other people. And it's really depending on our own journeys and what we've all experienced. So part of that is to touch on intergenerational trauma. So this is intergenerational trauma is the ongoing impact of a traumatic experience that happened in prior generations, but continues to impact current generations. So, how could trauma from 100 years ago impact your family today? It can, and it's really all about the cycle of transmission, how that trauma is passed along in a couple different ways. So, just as an example, let's think of someone named Anne. So, let's say Anne's great grandmother, Sarah, learned, to kind of that pull yourself up by your bootstraps type of attitude as a child during the Great Depression, because that's when she was being raised. So, with her family being focused on basic survival, and things like emotional discussions were rare and even possibly discouraged within her family. So by the time Sarah had children, her depression era challenges have now ended, right? That those same things are not, she's not dealing with those same things. N- Nevertheless, she maintained the same emotional unavailability that her parents have modeled for her. So now her children, like Anne's grandmother, adapted these patterns when they became parents. And then Anne's mother did the same. Now there's Anne who's left here to kind of wrestle with the effects of a trauma that happened more than a century ago. So this is really an example of how intergenerational trauma can be transmitted through different factors, different social factors. So, like a poor parent-child relationship or continued negative thinking patterns, things like that. So we can also think of the harm that was inflicted on groups of Native American people as well. So children being forcefully removed from the home as just one example of the harm that Indigenous people have experienced. So you think of children being forced into boarding schools. If these families were brought back together again, the trauma that they had experienced may have changed the way that they connected with one another. So, they were not parented during this time. They were not connected with, and they were harmed in many different ways. So now, as far as relationships go, parent-child relationships and sibling relationships, etc., sometimes we don't know how to be in these relationships because we did not experience them. Our parents did not experience them. Our grandparents did not experience them, whatever situation we're talking about. So now, you know, we don't know how to do that for the current relationships we're in because we were never given that. So, um, so these changes in worldview are really based on people's experience, and they can change the way that people care for future generations. So all of these traumas and loss of parenting, right, affected the ways we parent and the way we were raised. So it really stole the ability for us to love our children. Um, during this time when children were taken, we that was stolen from people, the ability to parent and love. So really, we have these generations of loss. Intergenerational trauma can also be passed through attachment relationships. So our psychological and our emotional developments all start from day one, right? Our ability to form secure, healthy relationships with the people around us, starting with our caregivers, is a key to feeling safe, being able to build empathy later in life. So if we experience like a disorganized attachment as a child, not knowing who is safe at any given time, we may experience now either kind of like an intense, indiscriminate affection as a child, or I'm sorry, as an adult, or a total lack thereof affection. Um, so this can really in turn affect our children's attachment themselves. So it can affect the child as we build our attachment with them. I hope I didn't fumble my words too much there. So now, as we can see, without connection, there really can be no cooperation. So relationships are the force behind cooperation. So we can't expect a child to behave if they are not connected with, if they don't feel connected, because they are physically unable to access the parts of their brain that they need to problem solve and to learn new skills and to cooperate with us. So think about a time when you have felt unsafe, in the past. So maybe you were in a near car accident, or even just when somebody kind of jumps out and scares you. If you think about that moment and how you felt, were you able to take in new information when you were in this feeling state? You were likely not able to take in new information because your brain went into safety mode. So you first have to feel safe. And then if you think about a time when you're lacking connection, so maybe it's with your partner, maybe you've been arguing all week and they ask you to bring them home some food for dinner. How likely are you to want to cooperate with them if you haven't been feeling connected, if you've been, arguing and disconnected? Versus when you are connected with them and you've been spending quality time together and communicating with them, and they ask you to grab them something to eat on the way home. So chances are then you're going to feel much more willing to cooperate. So the same is true for our children. We need to make sure they feel connected in order for them to be willing to cooperate with us. One huge thing to remember here is, again, those connections on the outside build connections on the inside. This allows children to override impulses, and a lot of the behaviors that children are doing are because of a lack of impulse control. So we already talked about how without connection, there can be no cooperation, and children won't be in that space to learn. And then, as a reminder for children who've experienced trauma, these connections might be even more important. So many have not experienced a consistent, secure attachment. Traumatized a traumatized child's brain might be wired for hurt instead of connection. So they really might need to be shown even more connection, even when it's harder to connect with them because of some of the big behaviors that they might have, or the lack of ability for them to connect with you. So they really do need strong, healthy connections in order to have continued healthy brain development. So on this slide, you, oops, see, you don't see yet. Now you see. On this slide, you will see what's needed for a good connection. So eye contact, touch, presence, and a playful situation. So we say a playful situation just because you can technically use the other three things while being hurtful or punishing a child. So these are the 4 ingredients that are needed to make a good connection. So it's not just saying hello from the other room or texting somebody that you love them. It's physically connecting with them. Oops, one more time. I needed to switch that for our playful situation. So it's really using all 4 of those ingredients to connect. Here are many different ways we can connect. These are different ways that families have shared with me. So start to think about how you personally interact, how you personally connect with your children, with babies, toddlers, older kids. How do you connect with the kids who need it the most? How do you connect with your peers or your spouse or your coworkers, with each other, anybody? So again, some examples are here of things that families have shared with me. Responding to their needs, soothing them, eye contact, touch, tickling games, peekaboo games, ceremonies, hugs and kisses, quality time, all different types of ideas, just a start of list of ideas for how we can connect with one another. Here is an example of I love you rituals. So this is just one way to connect with children, and it's through what is called I love you rituals. So this is another thing that Conscious Discipline has packaged and created for us. So there are these little songs or poems that go around along with kind of small little movements that we do with a child along with eye contact to create a good connection. So children of lots of different ages love these. We've done these with adults who have loved these, and they can really be worked into a routine. You know, maybe it's during diaper changing or saying goodbye when you drop off your child at school or going to bed, just as a few, examples. And there's many more of these. These are just a couple. If you want to screenshot this or take a picture of it, these are some cute little ones. One's Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. And you'll notice the words have changed. They're not what you might know of for the song Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. And then Round and Round the Garden goes the tummy bear, or goes the teddy bear. And you do little circles on their tummy there. I'm not 100% positive that the sound is going to work on this. I've had issues. However, I'm going to try. They're just little clips of myself doing an I love you ritual with my daughter, and then her turning around and doing that same I love you ritual for me. So you can find more of these on consciousdiscipline.com, and you can also contact us at the parenting department. Let's hope this plays for us here. There was a little mouse. He had a little house. Right? And then here's her doing it on me. There was a little mouse who had a little house, and he lived right here. So these are things that I have done with her. She knew she was being recorded at this time, but so she might have turned up that cheesy smile just a little bit, but she's adorable. So this one is called There Was a Little Mouse. And as you can see, it's easy, just a couple words to remember, and you just tickle them. And, you can make it your own in however way you want. I know her ticklish spot is right here in her neck, so I would end up right there where the mouse lives. Okay, so another helpful tool here is these 5 love languages. So this is a book. It's a book by Gary Chapman. And the premise of the 5 love languages is that different people with different personalities give and receive love in different ways. So by learning to recognize these preferences in yourself and in your loved ones, you can learn to identify, often the root of your conflicts, or you can connect in a much stronger way. and really truly become closer. So the 5 love languages are on your screen here. You see the acts of service. So for these people, actions speak louder than words. So any act that eases the burden of your responsibility. So it's like when somebody says, "Let me do that for you," or let me pick up the kids from school today so you can have 5 minutes to yourself. The next one is receiving gifts. So for some people, receiving like a heartfelt gift is what makes them feel most loved. So it's tangible symbols, but not necessarily materialism, right? So it's the love and the thoughtfulness and the effort behind the gift or gesture. Could be quality time. So this love language is all about giving the other person your undivided attention. So focused and full undivided attention when you're spending time together. So really being with somebody with the phone away, the TV off, that kind of thing. And then words of affirmation. So this love language uses words to affirm other people that they are loved. So verbal, kind of unsolicited compliments that express your love and appreciation for somebody. So it's hearing the words "I love you" and the reason for the love. And then physical touch. So to this person, nothing speaks more deeply than kind of an appropriate physical touch. This is a non-sexual touch that just reinforces your presence and your love for that person. So it's important to know our own love language so we can ask for what we need in our lives. And also because normally how we feel most loved is how we show love to others naturally. So, and it may not be that person's love language. So they might not be getting their needs met. So we want to try and speak our kids' love language so they feel seen, loved, and appreciated. We might have one child who feels most loved with gifts and another child who feels most loved with quality time. We need to learn those things about the loved ones in our life so we can give them what is most helpful for them. And then again, to know what is most helpful for us is really helpful as well. So you can go to 5lovelanguages.com and get more information. You can take a quiz to see what love language you fall under. Here's another slide that you might want to screenshot or take a picture of or just come back to. But these are the 5 love languages for kids. So they're the same love languages, but it gives us some examples for how we can show that to children. So if your child's love language is quality time, the last one on there, we want to give them undivided attention, do chores together, make a treat together, ask about their day, give them extra eye contact, play with them, do a craft, those kinds of things. So, and as I mentioned, play with them. That's another thing that can be difficult for some parents. If we were not played with, we do not know how to play. So becoming aware of these things so that we can try and adjust where possible to make sure that we are connecting with and showing love to our loved ones. Okay, so as we wrap up here, this is the area of the brain where we can access all of our skills. So they're listed on the screen here. You can see that these are many skills that we hope our children have mastered by certain ages, but often it doesn't turn out that way. So, and sometimes we end up wanting to punish them for lacking the skills that they don't yet have. So before we can get here into this prefrontal lobe here that you see in the green, which is where we want to be, which is where we hope our kids can spend most of their time, we have to first establish those needs of safety and connection. So that is the hugest thing I'm hoping that you walk away with today, that need for safety and that need for connection come before, providing consequences and having our children sit down at school and listen and learn. So we might not have all the answers or the magic wands that we wish we did for parenting, but we have the ability to learn about what our children's needs are and take care of ourselves so we can access our own higher centers and our own higher functioning skills to really be the parent that we want to be. And then once we meet that need for safety and connection for both them and ourselves, then, and again, then and only then, can we expect children to learn and retain information, behave and cooperate. Let's see what I just did here. I think this, here we go. I bumped something. So that's how we can expect children to learn and be able to retain information, behave, and cooperate in the way that we want them to. So we first have to meet their needs so they can be in a position to do those things and to access those skills that you see on the screen, from attention all the way down to emotional control. All these things, some of them you might not know for sure what some of them are. I'm not going to break down each one of those, but if you want any further information, you can reach out to us. So I really want to thank you for your time spent today on this information. I find it super important, so I appreciate that. I hope you gained some kind of insight. And if you do have further questions, or if you want to go more in depth with this information, reach out to the parenting program, one of the parenting program coordinators at Oneida Nation Family Services. You can reach us at 920-490-3700 and ask for a parenting program coordinator. And again, thank you, and I hope this was helpful.